topic, to understand your views on those and better ourselves in future. Three, we are on an online platform, so let's be considerate if we have a little lags, we have a little disconnections. Let's just wait for a bit and see if things resume. If not, we'll act on it. So yeah, be patient. Um, and finally, any questions, don't keep them in and wait till the end. Keep posting them on the chats. Like yesterday, we'll pick up the questions. Me and Piyush here will be able to monitor those and keep track of those. We'll take those questions and ask them to the speakers at logical intervals in between. Yeah. So without further ado, Piyush, I hand over to you. I have to hand over to Piyush, otherwise he's going to, not like it if I don't give him a chance to introduce all the speakers and also pragmatic leaders. Go ahead, Piyush.
Thanks, Kevin, and welcome everyone once again to this masterclass series by Pragmatic Leaders. And welcome everyone, all the speakers. So before we kickstart another session for today, I would like to give you all a quick brief about Pragmatic Leaders. Uh, we build Pragmatic Leaders as a bridge for mid-career technology professionals to confidently change career roles. We are on a journey to link training to employment and build holistically better alternatives to current alternatives in specialized business roles like product, growth, marketing, and more. We run pay after placement programs in product management for working professionals who are looking to transition and upskill. So with that unique approach, we have resulted in 79% placement success. And with an average 50% salary hikes, our learners are now building product for amazing companies like PayPal, Walmart Labs, Amazon, Casa One, and more. Um, you can check out all the our programs and other details on our website. I am adding link of our website in chat section, and you can all join our exclusive product community on Slack to network and stay updated with our upcoming events. I'll add link for the Slack community as well in chat section. So with that note, let's begin today's session as well. Today we have amazing speakers with us. First of them is Prayas Mittal. He's co-founder at he is a co-founder at GoSwift. They are simplifying shipping for brands and businesses in India, helping small and medium scale businesses to grow. Next one, we have Satyaki Banerjee. He is AVP of Product Management at IDFC. He has a vast experience in building and scaling products for banking sector. He has worked for Kotak Bank in the past and is now improving digital banking experience for IDFC First Bank. Next, we have Gokul Nair. He is joining us from San Francisco. He brings in 13 plus years of industry experience across product management and engineering functions in network security. He is working as director of product management and Ariaka Networks, and he has built amazing products for Cisco in past. And we have Kevin D'Souza with us. He is VP of Product at Pragmatic Leaders. He brings in 17 plus years of product management experience and business leadership experience in multiple industries. He has built valuable products for multiple brands and have delivered solutions to scale those products. Uh, so we welcome and we are really excited for another session with all of you today. I would like to hand over the session back to Kevin to speak more on our current product management landscape.
Uh, so thank you, Piyush. Thank you for that introduction and welcome again to all the wonderful speakers. I see Gokul here. Hi, Gokul. Uh, the other audiences, I would request participants to turn on cameras, give us some motivation. We're looking at names and the microphone, red microphones with a slash on it. So let's see some faces at least. Yeah. Uh, so let's move forward. And today I have a topic that I honestly keep close to my heart. The reason being, in product management, this is, I think, the ideology that I work with, and design thinking, right? So that's what uh, is a framework, is a mindset, is an ethos. So yesterday when I spoke about product management as a mindset, today it's the start of that mindset, and I like to approach or pretty much all my problems in product management through design thinking. Now this is it's been a very buzzword, it's a very inward, practiced very differently by different people, but there is something that I sort of work with, a methodology that I work with, and that's what I quickly want to run through in today's session, right? So What I'm going to focus upon is design thinking that is user centric. There is another one which I'll talk to you in the end of this part. But what I'm going to talk about and what is pretty much used everywhere is user centric. And what we mean by that is, in simple lingo, we are looking at what our user wants. What drives our user? What problems are we solving for our user? Right? And that's how we like to approach every problem or every product that we build is focused upon value that a user can derive from it. What are the steps that I look at? And this is something that I like to do in product management. I like to learn new concepts, through experience, through learning, through speaking with my peers, colleagues, and then I try building mental maps of those. And this is one of the mental maps that I use. The first thing I start with is a what is question, right? Where do we stand? I mean, there might be a product that I need to create or develop or problem I need to solve, but the first thing is, where do we stand? What's the current landscape? What's the current situation? And gather as much information. And then I try look at what if, right? And the what ifs are what possible solutions I could come up for those scenarios, those problems that were defined previously. The third thing I look at is from that what if bucket that I have created, and that could be real anything. I mean, it could just mean that I am going to create uh, a supersonic aircraft for a solution of logistics, right? But it may not be real. So the what ifs could be unreal also, but they need to be there, because that's how you sort of open up broad thinking. What wows come down to ideas that you really or your team really feels would move the needle with the customer and for the business also. Finally, when we look at what for the business, we look at two things. One is the viability, that's the business viability. Two is the feasibility, which is the technical feasibility of you producing that outcome, right? Can my company, do we have the resources and capabilities to build that? If not, can we bring that capability? If we can't bring that capability, then we rather not touch it, because that's something beyond our scope. I'm used to building a Hyundai. I can't plan on straight away building a Tesla, right? So I really need to know if I can do that. So that's the what works. And finally, I go to what next. What next is more of introspection, extrospection, where you check what you've done, whether you need to improvise, whether you need to pivot, or whether you need to kill it, right? But that's the what next. This is the broader line of steps. I'm quickly going to go through each one of them and speak on some tools on each one of them. Before that, the 5 steps of in more simpler terms is empathize. That is the what is. That's where you derive inspiration from. Unless you don't bring in the empathy, unless you don't put yourself in the user's shoe, you're not going to be able to list down the what is. So empathize. Then we go ahead and define the problem statement. Primarily, that's what we want to define: our scope of work, our metrics of success. Those are things we want to define early on before we start building. I mean, we need to know our goal or objective. If not, then we do not know where we're going. Uh, this is where we ideate with the team, with our users, test users. We ideate with them to see what works for them, right? What is actually going to really solve their problems. We quickly build this prototypes. I mean, there are different ways of approaching this. We can have working prototypes. You would have heard of something called rapid prototypes. Then we test those, and we repeat the cycle thereafter. The test is basically checking if we are on track. What if and what wows, did it really make sense? And that's where what we test. If it falls short, we improvise. If it falls way too short, we look at other alternatives. If it's doing well, we look at options that we can improvise on, right? Let's go through the steps quickly. The what is, which is empathize. I like to look at this from one angle. Yesterday, we discussed about creating personas and how we identify the pain points and touch points. Here is another approach I like to use as part of design thinking, is the think, see, feel, do approach. Write down everything your persona thinks, feels, sees, does, right? List that down. That's your primary approach that you want to capture, information that you want to capture about each of your personas, not just one, each of the personas that you have defined. These may be used during product development, may not be used, but you're still capturing them nevertheless. In terms of tools that I use here, and everybody generally, you may be wondering why is secondary first and primary second? Because normally in school till now we have always been taught primary comes first, secondary comes second. In marketing research, in user research, this is the opposite. Secondary research means data that is not proprietary, that is not necessarily owned by you, and which is got from the outside. And those are studies and reports, market research agencies who would give you some of these studies, and expert interviews. And these are secondary research that you would do because these are easily available, these are cheaper to achieve. And then you would move to primary research. That's your core research work. And you would do that by doing user interviews, immersive experience. When I say immersive experience, you actually say you're designing a product for a cab driver. You would actually go and take a cab ride with different personas, right? Different types of cab drivers. Could be a point A to point B, intercity, interstate, intrastate. You would do all of that. That's called immersive experience. You're actually feeling or seeing what that person is going through, and you're making your notes throughout this process. And then, of course, if you have past data, if you're improvising a product, you would have past data. You bring that into your primary research because that's your own data. This is the what is, and that would help you build a what if. In terms of, first, what you would do is take all that you've done in what is, bring it to your team, brainstorm, and then figure out what if you created a solution to this. What if this is the problem? Things like those, right? One way I like to approach this is the first thing after brainstorming, or probably even during or before brainstorming, I like to pen down on whiteboards. I draw very funny drawings, but you can see one of those guys on the picture on the screen is drawing something. Uh, you're creating something on whiteboard. You're doing a user journey on map on a whiteboard. You're saying this is where you start from. This is how the user moves through the entire process of that particular what is that you have defined, right? So you create those user journey maps. This is not in order. All these points are not in order. These are all the points that you need to work on. The objective is you're trying to go into a deep dive analysis of their root cause or their problems. And what you come out at the end are problem statements, right? You may have one, you may have many, but put them there. Uh, what you do with each problem statement is that you also figure out the current alternatives, right? You just don't leave them as problem statements. I mean, there is a problem, it's getting solved in some way. Uh, for example, if I don't have an ERP or an attendance system, digital attendance system, I will probably just be using a register. I don't need a competitor to give me another software. I can just use a plain old pen and paper to make notes of those for the attendance of staff or teams. So those are your substitutes. So you need to list down the current alternatives, how they are solving those problems currently. And that helps you in what? That helps you in ideating to recommend value propositions, right? So this is where you're able to now say that this is the problem. This is how they've been solving it. I can solve it better because you already know, you've done your research, you already know that yes, this is indeed a problem, and this solution will is something that you think, see, it's not tested yet, but you think this solution will help this customer, right? So you recommend value propositions. Again, you may have for each problem statement, you have a different value prop, right? From these value props, now as I said, you for each problem statement you have a different value prop. You actually then start combining those and see as a single set of feature what jobs need to be done to achieve the larger or solve a larger problem, right? So you list down jobs to be done, and all these jobs to be done are nothing but product features, right? That's what you're talking about. And there is a way that this can be approached, but I'm not covering that here. It's by itself a very detailed topic. Finally, we go back to the user journey maps that we had created previously. We take these jobs to be done and we plug them in there, right? We may be able to break it down into sub features, sub tasks for our team, and sub experiences. But it's very important to plug it back into that user journey map that you would have created. Now, once you've done with this, ideally there is one step that you go here and do is you go back and validate it with the test users that you had. You ask them about these problems. You tell them about these problems. You recommend these suggestions, and you say, how would you feel about these? Right. So that's another little deeper way of engaging with them and establishing that, okay, I think these users will like this, and validating it even before you go into building. One thing, keep in mind, the define test metrics. This is something that you should do at this stage. The moment you create your value propositions and jobs to be done, you should define a test metric, a KPI that would be linked to that feature, so that you're able to uh, use this in future. You know that this is how you are going to track your product, right? Next, we're going to go into, now we know what we want to build. We've thought about it. We have our test metrics ready. We have our jobs to be done, our feature list ready. We start building, but not the final product. And this is what yesterday Amit was mentioning about the MVP, right? We are going into an MVP, but it's not necessarily the product or the final thing. It's a process that we're going to follow. And we start building. And the first thing, since you have your consumer journey maps, you start building wireframes of how that communication, how that interaction is going to be there. And this wireframes primarily are for digital products, or products that are going into production, physical products there. Uh, and they both get approached a little differently, but wireframes are a good way to start. As a product manager, you are more concerned about wireframes. Your actual user interface will be taken care by the UX team. You need to be aware of it, but they will take care of it. We build from wireframes. The UX team can work on building working models and mockups, and finally, along with them and the tech team, you go ahead and you build a prototype, and that's primarily your MVP. You build it for a small subset of people that are your test users that you had in the beginning, and you run usability tests with them to see where you stand. And while you're doing this, you're constantly testing the test metrics that you mentioned. That's why I highlighted that. That's core to the entire issue, right? You need to get those test metrics, check for those. So for each test metric, you would have a metric, a threshold for success, a threshold for improvement or further research, or a threshold for failed status, right? And you're checking that metrics constantly while you're testing your initial MVP or product or idea, and then you iterate back, and this goes back to the beginning again, and you again flow down, and you're trying to build a better product thereon. One of the things you do here is build a priority list based on what you've learned in the past already, and you constantly keep updating this priority list. And as a product manager, this is something that you own, right? You would move things that would impact the user and your business to the top of the list to build. And uh, there are different ways of approaching prioritization, but this is pretty much how you would go through in a cycle. What next is the last part of it. Of course, after the test results, the what next comes in based on what you've got from your test results. After you have built something, you could look at giving incremental improvements, right? So those are minor improvements. So you've created an app, for example. Now you want to add a particular small feature or a button on it, or a particular transactional feature in it. You're adding those. Those are incremental improvements. But there are times when you just feel that you need a new business model altogether, because I think there is more to offer, and that's when you have radical improvements. And this has a very different approach again. This becomes a completely separate vertical altogether, and that's how companies actually start creating product verticals, because they have radical improvements in business model. And that's pretty much what happens on a design thinking cycle. Uh, from here, you loop back again to what is. As I told you in the beginning, there is something that we are approaching right now is user-centric design thinking. The world will, I feel, slowly move to sustainable design thinking. And what I mean by that, I'm not going to go into detail, but one word should give you an idea. It's called planet-centric design thinking. We will talk about that some other time, but for now, that's all for design thinking. And I would like to call on Prayas out here, who's also going to take you on another exciting topic of embracing tech from a non-tech background. And I think this is a very interesting topic for a lot of aspiring product managers. So Prayas, before I hand over to you, Piyush, can you run that poll for me?
Sure.
And Prayas, you can take over. Yeah.
Okay, there is same issue. We can take the
No
call
problem.
later.
We'll take the poll later, but Prayas can take over. Yeah. Over to you, Prayas. Prayas, you're muted right now.
Yeah. So maybe that comes from because from a non-tech background. Yeah. So thanks, Piyush, thanks, Kevin, for inviting me for the call. I think the topic of the discussion that we are having, how to move from a non-tech background to a product or a tech background, pro- into product management, which is entirely focused on tech, becomes a very challenging part for many people, and it's PM being one of the most coveted jobs these days. There's a lot of influx, or there's a lot of people who are trying to make that switch, right? Through various modes, through various due to various reasons, right? So how I'll structure the call is to sort of give a framework on how to think about moving from a non-tech background to a PM role, specifically for a tech product or a tech-led company, and what you should be focusing on maybe, and what are the strengths that you should leverage that you might be having currently, right? Feel free to ask any questions in between. Because I'm not created any slides as such, maybe like Kevin, but I just structure the call in a very uh, broad-based topic that we can discuss, right? So yeah, uh, let me just share the screen once. Can I share the screen? Do you have the
I've
anything?
I've given you permissions. You will be able to.
Yeah. So okay, so I'll start with a brief background on what was my journey. I'll just spend 2 3 minutes there and what I've been doing, and then move on to maybe how you can think about moving to a PM role, right? So I for my career, I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, but I've mostly worked into startups and e-commerce space and logistics space. So started my career with Reliance in 2014. Realized that that was not the pace or the field that I wanted to be in, and left my job around 4 to 5 months after joining. Then moved on to started my career after that. Again, started my career in operations in a ladder, worked there for about 1.5 years, and then eventually moved on to that is where the transition happened from an operation, supply chain, analytics role to a pure play product management role. It was an internal transfer from one team to another. Did a small stint at Flipkart after that for in the core e-card logistics team for product for about 11 to 12 months. Then that is when we started Swift about 2.5 years back. So I've been taking care of the product since then. Yeah, so that's a brief background about me. First question, I would say, if you're looking to move from a non-tech role to a product management role, is you need to be very clear on what product management is. What I see, and this will answer the questions that we will address in the next couple of minutes. What I see a lot when I'm interviewing a lot of PMs, or when people give feedback on that they want to move into product management, I'm not getting offer letters, or I'm not getting interview calls, stuff like that. First question I always ask, or try to get them to answer that question, is why do you want to move to a product management role? That what is driving you to move from, maybe you are a rock star marketer, why do you want to become a PM? Or you're a rock star engineer, why do you want to become a PM? Or you have been managing thousands of people in operations. Product management, or to a certain levels, is a very sort of individual contributor role. Why do you want to move from people management to an individual contributor role? So answering that question for yourself rather than anyone else who might be interviewing you is becomes the primary key. And I've heard questions from answers ranging from my, because PM is the highest paying job after tech to they PM is the CEO of the product to I just like problem solving to I couldn't get into consulting, so that's why I want to be the PM. Or it's the most generic general management role that I can get, right? So I think I've heard everything that might be there in the market. So, and I would not say that any answer is wrong or any answer is correct, but you need to be clear on why you are doing it. Because at the end of the day, it might be one of the most thankless jobs in the entire organization. You would be blamed for everything that's not going, or you would be not uh, given the credit to an extent if things are going well, because as a PM it is your job to boost the morale of the entire team, including engineers, analytics, marketing, right? So if if shit hits the fan, it is you. If it's going everything is hunky-dory, then everyone else is there, right? So it's a very leadership oriented sort of a role, even from the starting, right? So that is one thing that I usually tell people to understand and contemplate on why do you want to do product management, right? Now coming to yeah. So another thing is, if you are to bucketize a PM role at any organization into specific personas or characteristics or personality or skill set, it will be very hard to do that. There is a base set of things that a PM does that is there, but every PM would be a unique PM in their own way. Some might excel at analytics, some might excel at users research, some might be good at business, some might be good at tech, right? Some might be good at data. So you become a PM because of the background or the things that you've done in the past. It's not because you've gotten some specific training how to be a PM. And this holds true very specific to India, because in India, a lot of PM roles organically grow inside the organization rather than come with a specific set of training. Primarily because PM role didn't exist 6-7 years back in an Indian startup organization system. Most of the PMs that were there were in MNCs who were either doing 50-60% of project management because the marketing PM counterpart was in US, or uh, there were no great product-led companies, uh, or there were a handful of product-led companies that were there in India, right? So this is like 7-8 years, 10 years back. So if you see a lot of seasoned PM, either they have come from US or they have grown into it, they've acquired the skill by themselves by doing it, not by training or joining a course of sorts, right? I think that's what Pragmatic Leaders is also trying to solve for, right? So every PM becomes a unique PM in its own. You develop a certain set of skill sets that you have and you excel at, and then there are certain things that you will be good or so at, and then you try to improve on those parts, right? Now, how to think about it, how to apply, how to approach the entire application process, how to approach the entire switching part, how to switch from one from a non-tech role to a product role, right? So obviously there are certain level of basics that you need to cover, but to start with, I would say, because you would be working, I'm assuming you were working in the adjacent areas of what a PM does. So that is one of the primary reasons you might be attracted toward the role, or you have some sense on how what all PM does. And I think a lot of has been covered yesterday and today. Kevin has done that. There are many people who are coming after me who will be covering what a PM does. You need to understand what are your strengths, and uh, basically say that, okay, I might not be a PM by profession or by training or by experience, but there are certain level of strengths and things that are overlapping for me, which that that brings value to the table if I become a PM. So you need to understand those part and be able to communicate via your resume, via your intro calls, when you are applying, all those things, multiple touch points to the person or to the organization you are trying to convince you to hire as a PM. It can be an internal transfer, it can be a external application, it can be post MBA application, it can be internship, wherever, right? So you need to bring out those strengths. Give that other person a reason to hire you as a PM, or give you that opportunity to become a PM. Right? Similarly, you need to also focus on your weaknesses. You need to understand where are the things that other person would have a question mark on when they're looking at your resume, when they're looking at your profile, when they're talking to you. What are those question marks that they have in their mind? Let's say, I'll just give you an example. You come from a supply chain, I'll give my example. You come from a supply chain background in operations. One of the biggest questions that comes is, will this person be able to talk to an engineer? Will he be able to explain what the requirement is in a term that an engineer will understand? Does it even know the basic meaning of what an API, how systems interact? So don't don't let the other person have that doubt and improve on those kind of weaknesses, right? Now, another part of these kind of things when you're applying for a PM job is, I see a lot of resumes who have just applied randomly. Don't okay. Let me put it this way. They confuse product management with a lot of other adjacent roles that are there in the market, like program management or project management. Although a part of PM job would be project management and program management, but that's not the core skill you would be hiring for. So having that clarity in your head that I am going for a product role, not a program management role, and not emphasizing on that you have done project management and product management and program management in the past becomes a critical thing. That should come in your strengths rather than saying that this is why I'm applying, right? Because at times, if you've just done program management and not enough problem solving, not enough consumer thinking, not enough data backed analysis, you'll just, because you are competing with people who are coming with some level of technical depth. Maybe a developer is applying for a PM role, or some person who has been a analytics senior analyst or a analytics manager at some analytics firm is applying for a PM role. You will be stacked in maybe the lower 50th percentile or so, right? So how do you push yourself to the next level? That is the question that you need to answer. Again, thinking of it is not like it is a hard transition to make, but rather it is like switching lanes to an extent. Let's say you are doing product marketing, now I want to do product management. Being clear on why I want to do product management, why my skill set or my passion lies with product management more than product marketing. What, because I have done product marketing, there are certain things that I will bring to the table which a normal PM or any other PM will not be able to bring to the table. Plus, I know my weaknesses, that those are the things I'm working on, and maybe do a proof of why you are working on those things and how you are working on those things to improve your skill set on the weaknesses that you have. That's the transition. And at the end of the day, I think you need only one person to say yes for a product role rather than everyone saying yes. Yeah. So what I'll do now is maybe open up the floor for questions and answer specific questions if that's there. Yeah.
Thanks, Prayas. That was a very detailed
Yeah.
journey that you've given and nuances that you've given about the ones from non-tech backgrounds and how they need to move and approach, look at tech. We still have one question that's here, and this is from Polami, which says, I have a question. Since technical domain is huge and there are plethora of topics, what all should we read to suffice the demand that would help us to prepare?
Okay. So there are two parts to the answer. If the assumption is that you need to be a tech guru to be a PM, that's entirely incorrect. So don't assume that, right? Some of the best PMs that I've worked with would only understand tech कि उनको API पता है क्या होती है. That's it. That's pretty much it. Yeah, maybe they can write a query of SQL. right? That's the pretty much, that's the bare basic tech knowledge that they might have. Second is, what do you need to know? You do not need to know all the tech that is out there. What you need to understand is, when someone is asking you technical questions in an interview or inside, even if you are switching inside the organization, they're trying to understand whether you were curious enough, and because you want to move to a PM role, whether you were curious enough to understand what all tech was involved when you were doing your current job. So let's say I'm an analytics person, or let's say I'm a marketing person, and I uh, half of my, or to 20 to 30% of my job would be looking at Google Analytics data. Do I understand enough how Google Analytics work? I'm not saying that you have to code and implement Google Analytics, but do I understand the basic nuance of what a cookie does, what a session is, what is the difference between current Google Analytics and what is coming into the market, right? So those kind of questions. If you are in operations, do you understand systems in the sense that how does an ERP system of supply chain logistics or last mile logistics interact with the backend system, or how order is placed, right? Let's say you are a product marketing person at a SaaS company. Do you understand the nuances of why are you selling a particular set of product solutions or marketing to a particular set of segment? Why are you doing that? Do you understand the need, because a SaaS solution would be a fairly technical product? Do you understand basic nuances of how data is flowing inside the system? So I would say you should be reading up on how systems work rather than how actual code or actual tech implementation happens. I hope I answered the question.
I'm sure you did. It did makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep a lot of these questions towards the end. We'll move forward with the other topics, but I'm noting these questions, and we'll have the Q&A session towards the end, where all the speakers can address these questions. So thank you, Prayas, again. That was a wonderful
Sure.
from your end, and
Yeah.
I'll request Piyush to run those polls. One was for me, the topic that I spoke about, and then the topic for tech, tech, non-tech to tech in
Okay.
product management.
Okay.
Prayas, hang around. We'll just move forward, and we'll come to the Q&As towards the end, and I'm sure there will be questions for you. I'm already seeing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving forward, we're going to move now into something that is, again, very core to what we spoke about yesterday in terms of market research, and in also your interviews as in PM roles. And that's the topic of guesstimates, right? So guess estimates. And I'll ask Satyaki to come online.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi there. Satyaki, welcome, and all over to you.
Sure, thanks. I will just project my screen. Yeah. Now, so the topic of the one. Piyush, is there some control related clue that I have to take?
Okay, let me check. I already have shared access. You can see your screen.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Now, what is a guesstimate question, right? The most brain dead and vanilla definition would be that it's a mixture of guesswork and estimation. Right? But what I didn't know when I started interviewing was why are guesstimates important in a product management interview. Uh, Piyush, for some reason, I'm not able to move forward.
Okay.
Is that something you have to do?
I don't
Just
think.
click on the screen once, and on your screen, and
Okay, got it. Now, yeah. So, thank you. Resuming the why of this question. So, the first part of why guesstimates, right? There are three parts here. One is how do you approach problem solving, right? Are you analytical when you hear a problem? Are you able to break it down into structures? How do you react to unknown questions? What something that we as product managers do on a daily basis is randomly, figure out or think on our feet something is not working, some stuff that we thought will go live in at the last moment doesn't work out. Then how do you react to such unknown questions, right? You Do you get frustrated? Do you enjoy the uncertainty? All of that. And the third part is, where do you focus, right? uh, I'll, a lot of times what I see in interviews is, the moment I ask a question, the candidates will move directly to answering it, right? But as a product manager, one of your key qualities should be spending as much time as possible in the problem space and exploring the problem, defining the problem, that okay, this is where we are, these are our challenges, these are our constraints, right? So these are the three things that you have to keep in mind before you answer a guesstimate questions. Because the reason why knowing these three things is important is because now you know what is the interviewer actually looking for, right? Now there are 10 steps that help me answer guesstimate questions, and I'll just read through the list, but I'll take you through an example where I'll explain each step, right? Handhold you through the process, and then I'll throw up open another question which we will solve together. So one is, you clarify the question, whatever question you are being asked. Why is clarifying important? I'll come to that. Second is, you create a super equation or a broad structure that on the left hand side is what I need, and on the right hand side are the different pieces of the puzzle that I need to put together, right? Then you break it down in and solve each piece of that puzzle. Try to solve each piece of the puzzle. What you realize is, okay, here are some things, couple of things that I know, but here are most of things that I don't know, right? So it's good to take stock of what you know, your knowns and your unknowns. Out of your unknowns, get back to your interviewer and ask that sir, ma'am, or whoever, like Mr., Mrs., that these are the things that I don't know. Can you help me with some data points, figures, direction around these unknowns, right? The interviewer may choose to give you some hints, may choose to not give you hints. That's up to them, but you'll have to roll with that. Then what you do is, you take these individual smaller pieces and you create mini equations out of them to solve each of them, right? Once you have done that, solve them in smaller blocks, you consolidate and come back to the broader superstructure that you had created, and then you arrive at your calculation, right? Once you have arrived at your calculation, one thing to note, I mean, that's been my experience personally, is that in any guesstimate question, it's not possible to cover all the edge cases, etc., right? So but if you don't so a good strategy, like one of the good strategies that I have observed is, some people are good at guesstimates, they just list down that so this is my answer, but these are the things that I've not considered. What that does is, in a very smart way, you are trying to reduce the number of cross questions that can come forward from the interviewer, right? And post that, before you actually go back to the interviewer and say, here's my solution, I've solved it, I mean, it's a good strategy to go through your steps and calculations 2 or 3 times to do a sanity check. And then, as the 10th part or the last part of answering these questions, you take your interviewer through each step in a snapshotish way, right? The reason for that is, often solving these questions take 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, right? uh, just to give a recap to the interviewer that this is where we started, this is where we are, this is what we did, and this is what, right? So what I'll do is get on with one of the estimation questions, that estimate the number of Google searches that happen every day, right? Now, the first thing that we have to do is, we have to clarify the question. Why? Because it's a smart thing to do. It helps you reduce the scope of the question. Second is, good questions demonstrate good analytical capabilities. So these are the two reasons why I prefer asking clarifying questions. Some of the clarifying questions could be that, when you say Google search, are we considering only manual searches, or are we considering automated API based searches that systems might be throwing out? Are we talking about searches across only for mobiles or mobile plus web, right? Or and smart assistants, etc. Right. The second thing that you do as part of the 10-step process is you create a super equation. It's sort of a structure around that problem. The equation here would be that total Google searches per day is number of unique daily users who access Google search multiplied by average searches per user per day, right? So for example, if average search per user is 5 and number of users is 10, then the number of daily, it's like a 50 is the number that you arrive at. Now what you do is you break down that structure, right? On one hand, you have the first problem, that the number of unique daily users on Google search. On the second side, you have the daily number of searches. Now, um, take note, I'm going to solve these two problems in two different ways, right? As before, but before I do that, I list down my knowns and unknowns. I pretty much don't know anything at this point of time, but there are quite a few unknowns because we are talking about Google search, which is a massive ecosystem and at a global scale, that too. I would like to know some numbers, right? Like what is the global population, because we are talking global Google search scale here. uh, how many people in the world have internet access? Uh, we for a fact know that Google doesn't work in China, Yandex is popular in Russia. uh, that's the geographical part of it. Also the economic part of it, how much market share does Google hold across the world on an average, right? And also please do ask your interviewer that apart from all these things that I'm asking, is there any other data point that you can give out to me, right? I mean, you might just get lucky. Sorry. Now, so you ask the interviewers for your unknowns, and these are the answers that you get, right? Global population is 7.8 billion. Population with access to internet is 3.9 billion. Chinese population is 1.5 billion. Russian population is 150 million, and global market share for Google is 90%, right? Also, 50% of Russian search market is with Google and 50% with other players like Yandex, Bing, all of them, right? Now you solve your mini equations, right? We had chalked out two different problem statements. One was daily use number of users, and second was daily average searches, right? Which we are going to solve in two different ways. Now unique daily users, I'm going to use the data that I have received from my interviewer, that let's say the global population is 3.9 billion. From this global population with access to internet, now from this I'll remove the Chinese population and 50% of the Russian population, right? Then I'll share the 10 subtract the 10% market share that other competitors generally have. So if now here's another important thing, that when you are given any numbers, let's say for example population with internet access 3.9 billion, please always, for the sake of have make being able to crack it easily and quickly, round off your numbers. So I can say that 3.9 billion, let's assume 4 billion, right? I remove 1.5 billion, 70 million of Russia and 400 million of competitors. I'm left with 2 billion potential users that are using Google search on a daily basis, right? Now the second part, right? While the first part was me trying to solve it with data, the second part is going to be me trying to estimate, right? And one of the things that I do with these kind of questions specifically, especially questions around internet based products, etc., is use sort of the Pareto principle, that 80% of your productivity comes from 20% of the people, right? So what I do is I straight away consider that there are three categories of users, basis frequency of usage. One is the occasional users who do negligible or nothing, right? Let's just assume 50% of people don't do anything, right? That's 1 billion people doing zero searches. Then the medium frequency users who will probably Google one or two things. Let's just assume that two searches per day, right? Which is about 30% of your population, which is 2.2 billion searches. Then are your power users, right? Now, power users are people who use, probably people like me who Google 10 times or more in a day. So let's say that's 20%. That's the minority crowd that you have, right? 20% of people do about 4 billion searches, right? Now you consolidate both the pieces of the puzzle. Total number of daily Google searches in the world then is occasional users into number of daily searches plus medium frequency users into number of their daily searches plus power users into their number of daily searches, which gives us a figure of 6.5 billion. And now I don't know if the number is true or false, but this is just how I would solve it. That basis the structure that I have followed so far, all the basis each and every step, I arrive at the conclusion that there are about 6.5 billion searches, Google searches, that are happening every day. Now, before the interviewer cross questions me, I would like to just list out that I have not considered search happening on any other products, like people searching on Gmail for some email, on YouTube, all of that. Any search that is happening via any API, and voice search, Google Next, smart assistants, all of that, right? I do a quick glance through that. Okay, this is what I've done, this, and then I will at the end walk the interviewer through my steps, which is a give your interviewer a snapshot that this is where we started, this was my stepwise approach, this was the end result, which is 6.5 billion searches, and these are the assumptions, right? One of the assumptions I made was 50% people don't do anything, 30% search 2 times a day, 20% search 10 times a day, right? So that's about it. Now, one question that I have for, I'll obviously take questions. So Kevin, should we take questions first, or should we open this question out up to the candidates that
I think you can go ahead and run this question with the candidates. Let them get the hands-on experience of doing a real guesstimate. I think since it's fresh in their mind right now, and if they have doubts, you will clarify
yeah, yeah,
along the way. Yeah.
right. So the question is, can you estimate the number of WhatsApp chats that are being sent across India every day? Right. This is specific to India, number of chats on WhatsApp that's happening every day. This is the the 10-step process that I just followed to estimate number of Google searches happening every day. I'll just let this be out there and give you guys a couple of minutes to work through the solution. The question is, estimate number of chats happening on WhatsApp every day across India.
So, Taki, you're having some questions. I think clarification questions being posted on the chat.
I'm just trying to go to Zoom. 1 minute.
So some of them are trying to solve it. I think it's a good way to clarify them, and they can continue solving it.
Yeah. Yes.
Satyaki, you have to answer a lot of questions. If you read a question now, just say it here, say the answer on the chat, on the screen, so everybody hears it. Yeah,
Yeah.
will be easier for you.
Yeah. So does this include forwards? Yes, they do include forwards. Are we considering any one-way chats? All chats. I send you hi, you send me hi. That's two chats. Yes, messages, in short messages.
And what we could also open up, Satyaki, maybe
Yeah.
if somebody is interested to work by the solution and
Oh, yeah. Also, by the way, guys, these are for the sake of brevity and time. I'm giving away the data points that I want to give away. So you can step the fifth step. So yeah, anybody who wants to volunteer can come. Please join in.
just raise your hand or some gesture on screen, and we'll call you up. Not to be nervous, just say what you thought. I mean, there's no right or wrong. We're all working through it.
I mean, neither do I know the answer to this question. So people who are asking how many users are there, the data is out there on the screen.
And if I'm not wrong, these things can be assumed. I mean, when you're at an interview and things like that,
Yeah.
you can tell your interviewer that this is the assumption I'm making, as long as it's some logic to make that assumption.
Exactly. So I'll just move on to the first step, the clarifying question. I think a lot of people have already asked that is this, for example, is this for only mobile chats, or are we considering mobile and web? Are we considering forwards? Are we considering video, GIFs, different formats, right? I think we have excluded voice messages. So now the next step is to create a super equation, right? So anybody who wants to type out the super equation they're coming up with. Super equation is nothing but just like a broad overview of this is what I want on the left hand side, and these are the pieces of my puzzle on the right hand side. Correct. So Rohan society, I think. Okay.
Rohan has put something.
Yeah, which is more or less what I'll go with. That number of WhatsApp chats per day is number of daily active users, DAO for short, but daily active users on WhatsApp, multiplied by average number of chats sent by a user per day. Right? Now you have to break down the problem. So what Rohan has put out is actually more or less the formula that we want to put out.
Now we need to
But
plug in the numbers.
plug in the numbers. So they'll have to break it down first.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll just take it forward. We have two problems here. If we go by the formula, number of WhatsApp chats per day is equal to number of daily active users on WhatsApp multiplied by average number of chats sent by each user every day on average. Right. So yeah. So basis that equation, we have two problems that we want to solve. One is daily active users on WhatsApp. How do you get that? And second problem is average number of chats sent per day per user. So I'll take you back to my previous question where I showed you how I solved two problems in two different ways. Right. I think people are getting the flow here. So should I move forward, Kevin?
Yeah, please go ahead. I think we're getting the answers, we're having chats, so that's good. They're working on it. We can move forward. Yeah.
So I have already listed out the data points, right? So we know the number of internet users in India, we know the number of smartphones in India, we know the market share that WhatsApp holds in India, which is about 65%, right? Now we have to solve the mini equation first. The first mini equation is daily active users on WhatsApp, right? Which I think someone has already solved it on chat. About 65% of 624 million, so 400 million. The second one is average number of chats sent per day per user, and someone solved it here. Okay, anyway, so like I mentioned, three categories of potential users: not so active, let's say that's about 50% of your 400 million, which is 200 million. Active users, about 5 chats per day, a rough estimation. 30% of your 400 million does on average 5 chats per day, so 600 million chats. And highly active users who probably send out 50 texts per day, which is 20%, 80 million of your 400 million, right? So sum total, when you consolidate both of these pieces, you see that the not so active users into number of daily chats plus active users into their number of daily chats plus highly active users into their number of daily chats comes to roughly 1 billion texts or chats that people are sending across India every day. I don't know if the number is correct, but this is what I arrive at following my step. What I'll do is I'll list down my edge cases. I have not considered web chats. I have not considered voice chats. I'll do a quick sanity check, and I'll walk the interview through. Right. So yeah, that's about it. And yeah,
Right. So, Satyaki, that was a topic that you've taken that ideally takes. I have actually been through guesstimate sessions and uh, presentations and workshops on this, and it's something that takes maybe an hour and a half at a minimum.
yeah,
And really appreciate you taking this through within a span of what, probably around 20 minutes, little lower, around 30 minutes, right? So that is brilliant. And best thing is we saw people engaging with it, we saw the participants engaging with it. uh, we do have, of course, someone who has an apprehension, but that's okay. uh, you know uh, the idea is that the bulk got a first hand work through with your initial example, and then they were trying to solve, which is a good thing.
yeah.
uh,
So just to address someone who has said that just Google it and you'll get the answer. One thing, so I have been in this place where I'm not a B school guy. I just done my engineering. I prefer to stay that way. So I've not been taught how to answer it. So when I tried Googling things, one thing that I couldn't find is I get what you're solving, your answers, but how the hell do I go through the process? So I would say don't focus on the question, focus on the steps. I hope that adds some value to your interviews.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, the whole point of this workshop was the process that is to be followed, the approach to be taken, especially uh, at the interviews and even in your work. I mean, when you're doing your market research, you really need to know this. This is the approach. So thank you, Satyaki. We'll just move
Sure.
forward to the next session and stay along. We'll have Q and A's probably at the end here. And next, I'm going to okay. Before I go next, Piyush, run the poll. uh, so yeah, we were supposed to have a speaker, Kushagra, who's had a COVID emergency, and we just got to know 5 minutes before our session started. So we're gonna move forward, and Gokul here is going to take the next session, and he's going to look at product sense at PM interviews. Right. Welcome, Gokul, and
Yes.
thanks for taking the session. Over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Team, am I audible?
Very loud and clear.
Excellent. Let me just start sharing my screen. My screen is, you can see my screen, right?
Yes,
Can you see my
yes, we
screen?
can.
Yeah, perfect.
can.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, everyone. So today we will spend the next 20 minutes roughly on identifying what should be some of the best practices you follow when attempting any product sense interview. To give a quick introduction to myself, as Kevin introduced you, I'm working with Ariaka Networks, leading the product management portfolio there. So from a product sense perspective, the areas that we are going to spend time today is, first one, obviously, understand what a product sense question is. Understand what is a recommended structure to approach these sort of questions. And then, of course, we will take up a question that I will walk you through to make sure the approach or the structure fits in with a question-based approach. So starting off with the basics, right? What is product sense? Again, nothing very fancy. The product sense is basically a PM's capability to identify what makes a great product, right? And what is a great product? Two things. One, it should be able to achieve the business objectives, mostly aligning with the mission statement of your business. And second, it should show enough user empathy. Like it should be solving a major pain point for the end user. So as long as your idea or the product idea displays these two characteristics, yes, it makes product sense. Now, how would product sense questions look like? They typically look like, how would you improve something, or how would you design something, right? Example could be, how would you improve Facebook, or how would you build a parking lot? And the product sense questions are like probably one of the most common interview questions that you will go through. And I must say, if you will be really lucky if you are able to go through a complete interview process without going through this. So this is one of the most repeated or most commonly asked pattern. And that's the reason why I thought probably we'll spend some time on this today. So when an interviewer asks you a question like, how would you improve Facebook? What's running in an interviewer's head? What is he looking for, right? He's basically, or the most important thing for him would be how you approach the problem or what your thought process is. And this is exactly where a structure will come to your rescue. The second aspect where you will be evaluated is like how creative, innovative, or impactful your idea is. I mean, personally, when I put myself in an interview candidate's shoes, the second part is a little risky part, because at the spur of the moment to come up with really creative, impactful, you don't know, it's a big chance you are taking, right? Maybe if the topic is very familiar for you, you might be able to, or you have done good amount of research on that, you will be able to come up with a very creative idea. But if you are caught off guard, you might be probably proposing a mediocre idea. But if your approach is strong, then you might still be regarded as a strong candidate. And that's the reason why I thought we should spend more focus on the approach. And definitely the creative heads will come up with more creative ideas, where obviously they get a brownie point. So let's start with a sample question. How would you improve Facebook? The natural temptation for a candidate who does not try to go through a structure or an approach would be, okay, let me think about what's the next big thing Facebook is about to do. Maybe I will start thinking about Clubhouse and we'll say, okay, Mark Zuckerberg had said voice-based social media is going to be the next big thing. Clubhouse is disrupting that space, so I'm going to build it, right? This should not be your answer. Here you are going with a solution rather than going through an approach, right? So that's the most important part. Understand more than the solution, your focus should be on the approach. So we will see what could be some of the approaches. In a sense, like how should you be approaching a problem like this? Very similar to how Satyaki shared on the guesstimate problems, the number one thing to do is to ask the clarifying questions, because you want to ensure that you are on the same page as the interviewer. Any assumptions that you make without stating them could come to be costly, because he could be thinking of something else. Like in the case of this very specific question, how would you improve Facebook? You have to ask, okay, are you referring to Facebook app, or are you referring to Facebook as a company which has multiple portfolios like WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, etc., right? So basically you have to ensure you ask the right questions to identify and agree on the scope of the product and the problem. If it is like a parking lot question, obviously your questions would be around, okay, who is this parking lot meant for? Is it for a commercial retail center, an office, an apartment, or is it like a paid parking center in a city which is making money? You want to understand about the user traffic patterns, etc., right? So all of those fall into the category of this clarifying questions. Now, one very important thing is try to see, here maybe the answer you might get is, you are the VP of the product, you know it better, but doesn't harm to ask probing questions to understand if the business is facing some top of the mind challenge that they want to be solved. Maybe that's a clue for you to identify the right business objective and the right product improvements. Things could be like, for example, if I look from a Facebook perspective, are you seeing a challenge around declining monthly active users, or are you challenged to grow in a specific market segment, like maybe rural India? Are you seeing a specific market trend, like maybe moving into the voice-based social media platform, etc., right? So maybe this won't give you anything if the interviewer is tight-lipped, but if he wants you to be going in a specific direction, he has got something in his head, then he will be giving you some clues here that will help you make the right next steps. So after you have done the clarifying questions, the next big important thing for you is to establish a business objective. As a PM, very basic is, you won't get investments to do anything if you don't have a business objective, right? Or a business case associated with it. So what should be the key business objective when you are looking at this product improvement? And usually the key business or objectives will be like either acquisition of new users, retention of existing users, increasing your revenue, or increasing your customer engagement. At a high level, if you want to say, like, these will be the 4 big buckets into which the key business objectives will fall into. And which one will you pick typically depends on your current product state. If Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook maybe 2 months back, his focus would have been on acquisition of new users. But today, with probably 70, 80 billion annual revenue, probably that's not going to be his most important thing. He might think of, obviously, increasing revenue, but how would that revenue is coming for Facebook? It's primarily about their ad business. And ad business means you need more people who is spending more time with Facebook to sell ads to them. So effectively, for a product like Facebook, improving the customer engagement could be a very good business objective to pick from. And of course, sorry, I forgot to mention in the previous slide, I'm assuming that for today's the sample question, I'm going with the scope of Facebook to be the Facebook app, maybe your web, mobile app, whether it is iOS or Android. So that's sort of like the scope I'm taking, assuming it's blessed my interviewer. Okay. So for continuing with the process, I'm saying that yes, my key business objective is to improve customer engagement. And it's usually good to see if you could quantify that objective. Like, is it like by 10% or 20%, or especially if it is like a revenue, right? If the objective that you are asked to pick is around revenue, then it's very important to quantify it, because an idea that need to result in a 10x growth will be very different from an idea which need to result in a 20% growth. So but the key is always make sure any product sense question, you establish the product or the business objective, and then go to the end user to identify his pain points and stuff. Now, once you have set the business objective, you have to identify a North Star metric, like a key metric which will help you decide if the business objective is being addressed or met or not. So in the case of Facebook, when I'm picking customer engagement as my key objective, probably the key business metrics I would look at is like, okay, what's the number of monthly active users and what's the average active time a monthly active user is spending with Facebook, right? If these two numbers are going up, then the business is on the right track. But if this is going down, then I have a red flag. So the North Star metrics basically allows you at a business level to think if you are going in the right track, aligning with your objective, or you are digressing, or you need a corrective action. So now we have done things to be done on the business side of things. If you recall, like the product sense, I meant like you have the business side and you have the user empathy, right? So now we will go on to the user side of it. You have the business objective, but what will you do for the user so that he sees value in you? So that basically comes with identifying some user personas or user profiles and prioritizing them. So in this case, right, typically would suggest you pick at least 2, if not 3 personas that you would want to prioritize from. So the persona number 1 I'm picking here is, okay, I'm an office employee or a student, and I want to have weekend get together with my family or friends. We usually go for activities like hiking or eating out or going for maybe a resort or something like that. So can Facebook address this use case for the specific user persona? If I look at a very high level, before going into too much of weeds of it, I can see that this aligns very well with the Facebook's mission, which is around building communities by sharing, expression, etc. Right? So this is still bringing the community together in a social profile way. So it's a good fit in terms of the business mission of Facebook. Another persona that I might look at is like, okay, I'm a millennial in rural India. I see the craze of social media happening in the urban part of India. I want to be part of it. But I know I have a problem, which is the intermittent or slow internet connectivity, or maybe even like I have low device storage on my mobile. So this is definitely a big problem to address. In fact, Facebook tried to address it with their Facebook Lite version. But here, I'm not picking this persona as my core persona to start with, primarily because the stated business objective for me in this interview was improved customer engagement. Whereas here, whatever I try to do as Facebook, the experience that a user gets is going to be compromised if he does not have a good internet connectivity, right? At the end of it, I think Facebook even decided to close down their Facebook Lite, which was aimed at providing a trimmed down version of the whole Facebook app, primarily catering for countries which were on 2G or having very low device storage, etc. But again, if you see here, I'm mapping this persona against my business objective and then making a call. Is it the right or the best persona for me to look at? Or maybe I have a better option. And between the persona 1 and persona 2, given that my focus is on customer engagement, I'm going with persona 1. But yeah, if let's say Facebook was started in India 6 months back, then as Zuckerberg, probably I would have prioritized this persona, because my goal, my business objective itself is very different, right? Because it would have been like probably acquisition of users as the primary thing. And I'm in India, I want to get the maximum users there. Another persona could be like an handicraft merchant who want to sell his goods across the country. Like I don't have my own website, but I want to use the Facebook marketplace as a way to help me sell my goods across the country. Now, what could be the fit for this persona with what our business objective is? One, you can see that this is less of like, I mean, if he wants to really expand his business, then he really needs the logistics part of the e-commerce to be successful. And that's not something which fits very well with today's mission of Facebook. And if Facebook wants to go for doing that, obviously they can do it, but that means a change or an update of their mission statement, which comes with really enough weight being put behind that. So you will need a very, very strong business case and probability of success to get there to displace Amazons of the world. Another key concern is if he wants to do all e-commerce, then obviously the payment has to be part of the Facebook. And probably if you don't trust Facebook with your username password, forget you're trusting it with your credit card details, right? So that could be another concern. So from this set of personas, I'm going to pick persona 1. As you can see, this is not a very path-breaking moonshot idea. It's a very mediocre idea to start with, but maybe something realistic that you might come across or think about when you are going, when you are in an interview room. So now I have picked my user profile. How would I map him to how would I identify his pain points, right? So usually for identifying pain points of a user, it's a customer or user journey map is very, very useful. You try to list down what is the process or what are the steps the user will go through to achieve this use case. So in this case, as a person who want to plan for a get together, primarily maybe during weekends with his friends, what would be the key steps he will go through? I mean, one will be like he want to coordinate in his group of friends, identify some common interest, time, and a destination which will sort of like align with the common interest of that core members of the group. So if we drill it down a little better, the major pain point is like getting the right recommendations. Okay, where should I go, right? I wish someone was there to recommend me, okay, this is a place which aligns very well with your interest. Now, once I have got a few recommendations, I want to see, okay, is it really a good place? I want to research the credible reviews, because today getting reviews is not a very difficult thing. There are a lot of paid options for the reviews as well. So want to ensure the reviews are credible, they're coming in from real people that I know of, etc. Right? So if I find, if I can help to identify credible reviews for a destination, that will help me choose the right one. And then, of course, once you have found something good, you want to share it with your friends, and collectively you want to make a decision. So this is like the one big pain point where people spend a lot of time researching on internet to if they are looking at this specific use case. And when you think from Facebook perspective, today this end user might be going to a TripAdvisor or to a Yelp or something like that, and he's spending more time on those platforms. If I was Facebook, I would probably want to have them spend those time in my platform that I can show more ads to them, right? So this is one big pain point part that I would identify. And then, of course, there are other steps involved, like I want to do a reservation or payment. I want to plan the logistics of commute during the day of the trip. And then, of course, finally, sharing experience and reviews in my social circle. But from my product improvement perspective, I see that, yeah, the major pain point is around this first set of bullet points, and that's what I'm going to prioritize for my features. So with this pain points, I go into the product features that I want to prioritize. So I have created like a laundry list of like user stories, which we could say, yeah, this is my MVP to go to market. So effectively, I will have the Yelp type of FB pages for the major destinations, whether it is a restaurant or hiking trails, etc., where I will see user reviews, ratings, feedback, etc., right? Which will help me spend time in Facebook itself and get the research done. I would have some preference settings for this, what I call as meetup here, where I can specify which friends of mine I should be including in this meetup planning, the location preference, like probably within X miles of where I am residing, what type of activities, like I want to eat out or hiking or trails, etc., the dates, which works very well for us, etc. So based on this preference settings, I want the Facebook to provide recommendations. I mean, Facebook has all our data, like what I like, what I don't like, I mean, based on that, it's pretty easy for Facebook to have an AI driven algorithm to pop me up with the right recommendations. Okay, you can plan your next meetup here. You have something going on here, etc. Right? So that's another feature which I would prioritize. And then of course, it's all about amplification network effect. So I will have the going to meetup, like very similar to the going to event meeting notifications that we have today on Facebook. And then once you are there, you have experienced it, you want to post the reviews back to this Yelp type of a page, which will make sure the cycle continues, the feedback loop continues. So these are the things I will prioritize from an impact and efforts needed perspective. Now, there are a few other things like maybe I want to integrate with partner solutions for restaurant booking, resort reservation, etc. Or maybe even do all of that in Facebook, just like how a TripAdvisor does. Like you can even do the payment booking through Facebook. But again, this also goes back to the concerns I shared earlier. Do I want to get into the commercial aspect of it? Would people trust me with their payment data, etc., as Facebook, right? And then, of course, I mean, you want to have an integration with Uber or Lyft for booking the commute to the place, etc. But I mean, if you can see very well, like these are not part of my minimum viable product at all. Those are lower priorities, or maybe much higher efforts needed, depending on what you look at. So the ones in green is what I'm prioritizing to go forward, which will really address the pain point and achieve the business. And then obviously, whenever you are looking at anything like a UI, you should show the wireframing aspect. You can use pen and paper, whiteboard, or wireframing tools, depending on whether it's a interview happening now or you are given this as an assignment. But always make sure if it is something to do with user experience, provide a wireframing which shows how you think. And this is, I mean, I'm not spending time here because this by itself is a big topic which will consume a good amount of time. And then once you have defined all of this, you need to have some low-level metrics identified, which will track the success of this enhancement. For example, in this case, I want to see what's the growth happening with the new FB Yelp page reviews. That is during the month. How many more reviews are getting added on the FB Yelp page? Or how much is the growth happening on the FB Meetup schedules happening, right? So these are like matrices which will help me. Are the users using these specific new enhancements or not? Or is the growth aligned with my objectives or not? And this will keep track of, I mean, as a product manager, I always need metrics. So for the feature that I'm doing or for the overall business, I want to make sure the matrices are looked at to make sure we can do the right course correction as we progress. So finally, in an interview, you do all of it. And at the end of it, you have to summarize. So I'm summarizing here the steps, the 9 steps which we went through. So clarifying questions to start with, to identify the scope of the problem, identify the key business objective, and then define a key metric that will help you track your business objective, like the North Star metric for you. Then go to the user side, identify the user profiles and prioritize based on their fit into the business objective. Create a user journey map to identify the key pain points. Then prioritize the features based on what is most relevant, and do a wireframing and go with the defining the low level metrics. And finally, you can just summarize this all for the interviewer so that he really understands what was your thought process, how you went about it. And I mean, it will always be a very interactive discussion when you go for a product sense interview. Unfortunately, today with the limitation of time, we can't do that. But I mean, you can always expect interviewer to throw in something which might try to take you off the track, but always make sure you come back to this structure so that you don't go elsewhere and lose your track. So that's what primarily I wanted to share with you. Any questions, Steve?
Gokul, there is a question from Vinay, and there are two rather. So It's in the chat. One, he says, doesn't FB already have restaurant pages and meetup features? So he's going into specifics of the features that are there.
Right. So I haven't researched a lot. I know like FB has some events by itself. I don't know if they have really like a restaurant page, like equivalent of a Yelp by itself. Unless the businesses might want to have their profile there, right? In terms of like as a user, anyone can go and create their FB page. I can be a user or I can be a business. So you might see travel agencies creating there or restaurants creating there. But usually if as a end user I want to research for a restaurant or a review, am I going to Facebook today? No, I'm going to maybe Google, I'm going to maybe Yelp to do that research. So unless you establish a platform to be really meant for that use case, you're not going to go there, right? So here the intention is like what a TripAdvisor is for trips, or like what a Yelp is for probably the reviews. If Facebook really become like, that's not like a side project, right? It's something which you emphasize on, and user understands that, okay, Facebook is the best place for me to get the right reviews and research done. Then that's what I'm talking about today. Like they do have some of these capabilities. I know, like meeting events as an example, but it's like you have these events happening, these people are going, but I don't get any more information. Okay, is this event really good? What has been the feedback about this from the past experience? If to research for that, I have to go elsewhere, probably to a Google or any other platform.
Detailed explanation, and I'd like to add to that, Gokul. I think with the very specific feature that's here, like the restaurant page or the meetup feature, in the context of the interview itself or the process of the interview, it's not absolutely necessary that you're spot on in really creating a new feature altogether. It may be an
Exactly.
existing feature, you may not be aware of it, but that's fine,
Exactly.
right? Because the interview just wants to look at how you have tackled the entire problem, and how you have come up and your reasoning. So what you gave now was a perfect reasoning to that question, but and that probably could be an interviewer question, right? That
Right.
you
Exactly.
already probably have it, but then you sort of gave an answer to that interviewer in that way, and that's the crux of managing
Right.
and staying back on track. The interviewer tries to throw you off track, and you want to always come back on track. uh,
Exactly.
there is another one here from Udaya saying, I was a tech engineer for a good 3 years with Juniper Networks. And how do I link that experience to my PM transition journey to network companies such as Cisco, Citrix, Aryaka? Any pointers, please?
With respect to transitioning into a product manager role from a tech role, I know personally a lot of my friends who have done that transition. So it's not, it's not like a impossible battle for sure. Um, so the one big advantage for you would be the fact that when you look at the product companies that you stated, they typically have a lot of weightage for the domain expertise as well. Like if you are from a networking domain, then that is valued from a product management perspective as well. So the key would be to identify opportunities where which aligns very well with what you have done in the past. Like for example, you may, as a tech engineer, you would have been doing a lot of front ending with customers, and as well as like you might be very detailed on the technology side of things. So that could work to your advantage. But I would say like you would need to do a few things. One, identify the right opportunities which fits in with your expertise. Second, with you should always try to get in touch with probably PMs in your company, so that you can get an opportunity to work with them in some shadow projects, PM projects, etc., which will bring you to their radar of, okay, there is a candidate whom I could consider when there is opening coming in. So I would highly encourage the second part one, especially if you can work with your PM teams to get to do some projects that would help you showcase a lot of credibility from a PM perspective in your resume, as well as getting them to know you and put you in their radar when an opportunity comes in next time. In fact, that's something which I did in my career when I mean, initially I started off in engineering. I did my MBA and then I transitioned to product management. But effectively, when I was hunting for the product management role, what I did was to work with the PMs in Cisco. I was in Cisco at that point of time, and I worked on a couple of projects, PM projects. That added a lot of weightage for me in my profile, as well as when there was an opportunity later on in Cisco, I was able to um, grab that.
Perfect, Gokul. I think
And it's not just for hardware. In my case, I was completely on the software side. But yeah, it's technology. So when you look at technology, it's a little different. So whether it is hardware or software, it's possible. I mean, but you would need to have this background work done.
So I think he asked the right question to the right person. Yeah. So thanks, Gokul. That was a wonderful. I wish in my early days I had attended a session with you or a session like this, where it was so clear as to what you need to do and what sort of mindset you need to sit at the interview table with, and beautifully covered by you. So thank you so much for that, Piyush.
Thank you,
You
Kevin.
can run the poll. And while we're at questions, I'm also going to ask our other speakers, Prayas and Satyaki here, if you can come on. We have a few questions that are that I had picked up earlier from the chat, and we'll try to answer those before we close today's session. This is a question from Nandini, and she asks, for an existing product, if there are new features to be built, how to go ahead with user testing and prototyping, given there is low engagement and no power users in the beginning. And it's open to anyone, any one of you who would like to take a jab, or all of you if you want to take a jab at it. Do you want me to put it on the chat if that would make it easier?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
Right. So there it goes.
Okay, so maybe I can take a stab at it.
Yes.
So
Please.
typically if you think from a real world product management perspective, right? You will be creating a feature only after you have done a validation with the market or with the customers that this is something really useful for them, right? In the sense of product, I mean, typically what will happen is you will get your customers waiting for something for quite some time before it get productized in the real world. But when you are looking for maybe the fast moving consumer technology front, you will typically identify a core, like probably one of your loyal customers, your technical advisory board customers, etc., to work with to make sure the idea is relevant, and then you will see it in with a wider range of customers to make sure it's indeed valuable before you go into the productization exercise.
Yeah, fair answer. And to the last part, just adding there that you don't need to look when you're building new features. You don't really need to look for power users. You don't look for power users, right? They become power users.
Right, exactly.
And that's because you're really adding value at that point. They evangelize the product. So as Gokul rightly said, right? You look for internally in your existing product range, what are your customers, and try to see which customers. I mean, many companies do this very often, right? They sign you up for beta testing and beta releases of products, and that's primarily what they're doing. They're trying to see if you can be a test subject in lots of better words, right? Great. So there's another question here, and this is from Nutan, which says, what kind of artifacts a product management, I'm guessing it's product manager, usually creates? What kind of artifacts a product manager usually creates?
too many. Yeah. So
I think I'll
yeah, please.
Go ahead.
the broader answer is whatever gets shit done. So whether it is a ticket in Jia or whatever, or PRD or online doc or marketing ka plan, So whatever get things done, but primarily it will be some sort of a business requirement doc and as well as a product roadmap. So these are the two primary things that you'll focus on day in day out.
Very, very to the point and clear answer. Thanks, Priya. I have another question here, and this is by Harsh.
Just
Uh,
like just to add there,
yeah, sure.
try and keep like a docket of documents handy, because you never know uh, what is it that you have to send out. Do you have to send out a suddenly a data sheet with or an email or a user story is there? That's sort of the table stakes, wireframes and user stories. But apart from other than that, keep your data handy. I some what I do is for maybe for each feature or each product, I keep a document where I save all the wireframes, documents, data, tracking, tracker sheet, everything.
Right. And it makes a lot of sense also. I just want to add to that I have figured out that no point reinventing every time, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there are templates available. If there is a template available, take it. There's no shy in copying. Copying and pasting was built for that. Those two buttons were created for those reasons. Use those templates, reduce your time and work that you could be doing some other productive things with. So, and build that docket set or template set.
Choose and commit.
Right.
And many a times what happen is, again, depending on the size of the organization that you're part of, right? As a PM, you may not be doing the whole 360 degree of product management, both inbound and outbound. Maybe in some bigger organization, especially, you might have a section, like probably you are more inbound focused, rather working with engineering and internal stakeholders, or you might be working more on the outbound side with field and customer. So in those cases, again, where you spend maybe 70% of your time might really depend on your core responsibilities, what you're really responsible for and who your stakeholders are.
Right. So I think that question gets fair responses. I have posted one more, and it sort of got a little lost
Yeah.
there.
I'll answer that because I've done this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I think from a program management to a product management role, the best way to do it is move internally. And that's the hard truth and the factual reality. So if you're doing product program management at Flipkart, try getting a product management role at Flipkart, right? Or you're doing program management at Ola or wherever, try getting a PM role into the same organization. There are two reasons to it. One is because there is a certain level of comfort that you would have built with the product team already. Second is the risk of taking a chance for you to move to product, and both from your side as well as the company is drastically reduced when you're doing it inside the organization. So it will be really easy compared to you finding another job outside, right? Second is from a CV standpoint, I think it will be broadly same. If I were to see that, if I am a program manager versus a product manager, I would put similar stuff. Talk about metrics, talk about problems I've solved, talk about maybe business impact and stuff like that. Very similar to stuff like that. But difference will come in when I'm interviewing. The question that will be asked for program versus product will be more focused on problem solving, identification, as program will be more focused on how you would have managed conflicts, how you would have managed stakeholders, how did you prioritize, stuff like that. And it is, I've seen it very evident in people who are coming from program management. They try and focus on the part that is good for program management rather product management. So it actually acts against them when you are interviewing for a product manager role, because you are basically solidifying the hypothesis of the interviewer that you are a program focused person, not a product focused person. Yeah, if anyone else wants to add to it.
I think that is pretty precise, but yeah, sure. Is Satyaki Gokul want to say?
I think he summed it up well.
So we'll go to the next one, and this one is from Vatsala, which says, is switching to an APM role in a startup after 6 years of software development experience in a top organization a bad opportunity?
If they pay you well, no. And if you're interested in making product, making a career in product management, so
I think it boils down to what you want to do, where your interest lies.
yeah.
Um, I can say that yes, if it's a startup which is like which has at least lightly figured out what they need to be doing, then you will have typically a lot of learnings, right? Because I mean, in startups, you typically get to learn more things, experiment more things. So that would be a good learning opportunity. But of course, it's very hard to identify how solid the startup is before you join in. Like, is it gonna close the shop in the next 1 month, or it's gonna be the next unicorn? You never know. So there are some risk parts there, but if your focus is on learning and on your personal side, you can afford to have the switch done from your financial security, or what is top of mind for you from your career standpoint. Yeah, it's not a bad opportunity in my opinion.
So it's actually interesting what Google mentioned. I've gone through this. I was a software developer, joined a startup which ended up wrapping up in a month and half of me joining it. And then I also joined as an EPM at a startup where the people actually knew what they're doing and they were passionate about it. One thing that I've realized is that if you're joining an early stage startup, talk to the founders and whoever your hiring manager is, and talk in detail about the problem that they are trying to solve. If they're going to throw around buzzwords at you with
Right.
market size, total addressable market, funding, potential, this, that, they don't understand the problem. You talk to the people, understand if they understand the problem, what they're getting into, right? Only then, if they know the problem space, I think there's a lot, and the pay is good or it's not a problem for you. I think it's a good switch to make if you're actually interested in building products.
Very true. Very true. Uh, I'm going to put up another question here, and quite relevant question probably. Are certifications like CSPO, AIP, MM, etc. valued during an interview? Everyone has that smile on their face, and
No, no, I'll give the straightforward cut to cut answer. Uh, I have not seen anyone get a job because they have the CSPO or whatever. Like, I don't even know what AIP. Whole Indian ecosystem, specifically maybe Bangalore startup ecosystem, might be specifically true for a US MNC who are specifically looking for something like that, or the job demands for it. I don't know whether like CSP or something like that is a very crucial part in major banks, or where they require you to be a certain level skilled in some certification and stuff. Unless and until there is a compliance related to it, I've not seen anyone get job because of it.
I agree. I tend to agree with that. Certifications by itself will not, I mean, they are not going to see if you have a certification and then eliminate you, or if you have it, you are in. That's not going to be the case. But if the JD really asks for some skill set, and if that certification is very apt to showcase that you have done something in your resume, then it makes sense. But yeah, it's just it's adding some credibility factor to you. Um, but better make sure, like, when you do the interview, and if they ask something on that, if it's really important for that JD, then you are on top of it. Otherwise it might work against as well.
yeah, and I also absolutely agree with that. I mean, I have uh, absolutely never seen a certification, or even these days you have micro degrees and things like those in product management, and I honestly don't see any of them even looked at, because when you are at the interview table, all they want to know is exactly what you three guys have spoken about today. How do you approach any of those things, right? At the interview table, and that's all that matters to an interviewer. I mean, that guy will rarely even look at the education column,
Yeah.
the certification column.
Yeah.
Uh, for many of these interviews, what I have seen is they hardly even look at what you've done in the past. They ask you to tell what they've done, what you've done in the past, and they'll try to sort of probe into it, and then they would work straight into some case, some problem solution, and things like those. Right? They would straight away get to task. So yeah, I also agree totally with that.
User certifications, I would say, primarily for your learning. If you think you are learning something from it, use it, but don't think it as the shortcut way for us to get a job change or something like that, especially in the product management space.
So I would go to an extreme and say that even getting an MBA might not work. So you will not be a PM because you have an MBA. You will become a PM. It'll help you give better interviews, better problem solving, address things. But that certificate of PM will not help you. Whoa, sorry, MBA will not help you.
And I have an MBA from ISB, but I still would agree with you that it doesn't really do much at the interview table, right? It gives you that learning, as what Gokul also said. It gives you that learning, probably something, some new mind maps, some new contexts and contents, but it's not really the sure shot stairway to PM. uh,
Right.
there is one question here, and this is by Aditya. It's an interesting question. Every article about PM job role are focused on metrics. Why the metrics are so important in product management?
I think metrics is the way by which, I mean, obviously things are measured, right? You need metrics to measure your success. So, like how we went through in the product sense question, you're building something, but how do you know if it is working or not? And if it is working, you grow as a PM. If it is not working, probably it's time for you to find another place, right? So the performance is really related and measured by matrices. The organizations might track matrices differently depending on what stage of your career you are in. Like, for example, if you are a VP for a product line, then ultimately it's all boiling down to profit and loss. Nothing else probably matter. But if you are a technology PM, it might be more related to the usage of that functionality which you are building in. Like, at the end of it, you can safely assume that at the end of 12 months, a question will come back to you. Why did we build this feature? Nobody is using it, right? And that's a black bug for you as a PM. So always make sure we work on the metrics part. As a PM, you should be always aware of where your product portfolio is. And maybe you might need to flash it quite often to the leadership to show, yeah, you are on track. What you're doing is valuable to the company.
Also, understanding the metrics part of it will help you land a better job, because I keep interviewing people, and I mean, MBAs, non-MBAs, startups, non-startups, corporates, very few people actually talk metrics. When I ask them, why did you build this feature? They're like, I just built it. Yeah, either I was told to build it, or I thought my competitor is building it, so I'll build it. But why did you build it? What impact did it have? Right? If you measure it, you will know exactly what's happening, and that gives you a tremendous edge. Even if you're like internally, if you are already a PM and you're sitting with a bunch of other PMs, 6 7 other PMs, and you are the one with razor sharp focus on metrics, you are miles ahead of them.
And by default, right, as a PM, I mean, usually I will always have a mindset to screen of things that comes onto the table, like, because always a laundry list of things will get added, enhancement requests will come in, alternate directions will come in. So the question which help you answer whether you want to take it up or not is basically that gut feel you get from a quantifiable gut feel, I would say, right? It's not just up from the air, but you want to say, okay, is it relevant for the market? Is it resulting in some metrics that really we track, right? And only if it is appealing to that metric, you would probably even considering to take it down to the rest of the organization for prioritization or scoping or anything of that sort. So I would say, yes, metrics are very highly important for a PM, irrespective of whether you are an entry level PM or probably a VP running a full product line.
Right. So we are bang on time, and but the questions are still coming in. So I'm just going to ask last two questions, and this is a more generic. So I'll go to a little specific question. If one wants to move into a PM role in automotive industry like EV, etc., what are the key things that they should equip themselves with? And I'm guessing in terms of skill sets, or what should be their approach in PM.
Get the domain understanding. It doesn't matter if it's automotive that you're interested in, or banking, or e-commerce. But if you want to get into something as a product manager, uh, I it's my theory is that it helps if if you know the domain in and out. Maybe not in and out, but to a dangerously good level, right? And you know what's going around, what are the trends that are happening, what are the things that are people building, what are the challenges, what are the constraints, how is the market moving forward in that sector. Also your view, your opinion on what is happening, right? For example, around EV, especially in India right now, we are lacking infrastructure, right, and government regulations. So being aware of what is happening, being understanding the domain, not just for the buzzword of it, but actually understanding what's the domain all about, not just Tesla. Tesla is one part of EV, right? So,
Exactly.
so
Very true, very true. And I think, yeah, I'll just add in there, and it sort of also takes care of one question that Aditya had. He's into mechanical engineering, and he was into it and moved to UX design and thinking whether he should get into PM. On the same line, so my background, I come as a mechanical engineer. God did a stint in aviation for a bit, and then went into construction. I built a 77-story curved tower. I built one of the largest, 845 suites hotel. So it's bigger. It's bigger than the biggest hotel in India. And from there, I go into business, and then I get into education, and then I get into finally exited one of those companies, and then I come into product, right? And it's product management is a calling. You could be from any domain, as long as you see you're growing. As Satyaki said earlier, right? If they're paying you well, and if it's paying you well, and of course it should interest you. If it's your calling, go for it. Your background may be anything, and life doesn't end at making one transition. You keep making transitions as long as you keep seeing that it's definitely adding value to yourself, and you think you can grow in it. Ultimately you need to grow. So I think with that, I also indirectly answered a few questions that were already on my screen. So I sort of related everything together and put it there. And with this question regarding having degrees as IITs and IIMs on your profile for job interviews, it may sound like a marketing pitch, but that's what pragmatic leaders sort of honestly, specializes that you don't need to have that on your resume just to land up at the interview door. It's mentors like Prayas, Gokul, Satyaki here, who guide you into not only giving you that framework, preparing you for those interviews, but also the connections and the network that Pragmatic itself has, which takes you to those doorsteps of at least the interview without having those big tags that necessarily agree. And totally agree with what Prayas said there, right? You don't even need to have an MBA to become a PM. So
So I'll add to that last part, right?
go
Because
ahead.
that's a very big, I would say, apprehension with everyone who might have joined this call, and in general when people are applying for PM, right? The only thing there are, okay, let me put it that there are two steps to it. First, get an interview and crack the interview. There are two steps, right? The only thing that a degree might help you, or IIT or IIM, whatever it can in any form, is getting the foot in the door. The conversion will not depend on it.
That's
Now,
right.
if you are not, let's say, from IIT, IIM, it's not that easy for you to get your foot into the door, then think about why will that person whom you're emailing, messaging on LinkedIn, DMing on Twitter, even that first step is also a high leverage power step. So let's say you're pinging a PM at some a big MNC or wherever, or a founder saying that I want to do PMing, this is my skill set. That also takes you places, not just applying over a normal job on LinkedIn or AngelList. Tell them why do you want to do a PM. Do that extra work of why they should prefer you compared to someone else, right? And that will take you and get you the interview. So that's the hack. That's the only hack that you have leverage with you. It can be as simple as maybe pointing out a bug on the website. It can be a small message saying that, okay, why I'm passionate about PMing. or anything of that sort. And that is what I see, because I've been hiring for the last 2 months, a lot of PM, doing a lot of PM interviews across the board. So me responding to someone is contingent on that fact, not on whether you're from IIT or a BITS or IIM. I am sometimes put off by saying that, okay, you have followed a certain trajectory, which is very conventional. You will not fit in this startup for sure, because there is certain level of risk that might be required. So it goes both ways.
See, in my opinion, right, I will be probably sounding a little neutral here. I did my MBA from IIM Bangalore, and I know, like, I had struggled probably around 1 year to crack into product management, even though I had that degree. So what I would say is this: when a interviewer or when a company is looking for a product management position, there will be a lot of candidates who will be applying for it. Like, if you ask in your company how many want to be a PM, pretty much everyone will say I want to be a PM. So for an interviewer, they want to identify, okay, how are you differentiated, right? There has to be a credibility factor that should come to you as a candidate, and that comes from learning. I mean, whether it is like a micro degree or a 2-year degree or a certification or experience, right? So the learning, if you are able to showcase it some way, that will work to your favor to get a call in there. But whatever degree that you have on your resume, in the first call, the interviewer will figure out, okay, where are you really cut out for this kind of a position or not? And like, have you got that ingredient in you? They don't expect you to be like the master of it, but do you have that spark? They would be usually trying to figure out. And if you have a good understanding, I mean, I know a lot of friends like who having gone to an IIM or IIT, but are like much better than me when it comes to product sense, because they have really experienced it. And probably, I mean, you go to, in our India, right? There is a lot of small scale businesses which happen that is run beautifully, even though they have none of this degree. So that product sense really matters. And whatever you have in your profile to add credibility to it might work in your favor to get an interview call. But the conversion really depends on what you are aware of or how you tackle the specific interview process.
Yeah.
Very true. So we're about 8 minutes over schedule. I think we're going to call it the end to questions there. Piyush, are we good with the polls?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So I'm going to, once again, thank everybody here. Before I hand it over to Piyush, Rohan, Rishwa, and Sneha, you had some questions which I have not necessarily answered. Please reach out to us, at Pragmatic Leaders. Piyush is right here. You can ping him, and he's going to make sure your questions are definitely answered. For those who have still stayed on, and I'm sure some of you or most of you were there yesterday, but I'm once again going to reiterate, please go to truemerit.io. I'm posting it on the link on the chat. Request for early access, and we'll give you access in the next 2 working days to a program that's built by Talvinder. And it's we normally charge about 150 USD for that, and it's coming absolutely free for the ones who register before midnight tonight, right? Also, there were some messages that I got on the program details that Pragmatic offers, and we actually have a cohort that starts this coming week, and just posting the link to that. If people are interested in it, please do click that link on Pragmatic Leaders, and you'll find more information. Piyush and the team and myself are available for any discussions there. So once again, thank you all. Piyush, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks a lot. So thanks a lot, everyone, Kevin, Prayas, Satyaki, Gokul, for taking out time and conducting such an insightful session for Pragmatic Leaders. And a special thanks to all of you for being such a wonderful audience. I'm sure everyone would have got lot of takeaways from this Power Pack session, a 2-day masterclass. But this is not all. We'll be announcing some amazing series of masterclass session in a completely new avatar with a new platform going live. And a lot more is coming along with that. So we'll keep you posted for that. And yes, that's all from my end. If you have any queries, you can reach out to me or reach out to anyone of us from our team. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good
Thank
week.
you, everyone.
And Gokul, thanks for joining us from the US. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, team. Bye bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.